Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. O'Keefe present and accounted for here in the O'Keefe studio, front porch kind of reading time. Anybody tell you that reading on a front porch isn't a totally worthwhile thing to do? They're lying to you. It is one of the best places that you can possibly spend time reading, especially when you're reading with a friend and reading with a group of people who you love to spend time with. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. John O'Keefe, Mr. O, stretching into a new realm, a new book, a brand new adventure for us all. And I will tell you, thank you to every single one of you who came in and spent a little bit of time with us, who did the voting. I will tell you, if I am not mistaken, we had more votes than the number of kids in the classroom. So I think some people may have doubled up. It is not an unfair way to do it because I guess SurveyMonkey lets you do that. Hello, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to our second novel. I want to tell you that the choices are absolutely brilliant. I will tell you that they will constantly be new opportunities and invitations because all four of these books that I recommended have something of absolute essentiality to my life and hopefully to your life. But out of the four, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, Seven Wonders of Sassafras Springs, Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, and Where the Red Fern Grows. These were the four books that I gave you as an opportunity. If you have ideas for other books that we should consider in the future, bring it on. Send it to us. But now it's time to unveil, I suppose. What I want to tell you is the book in which we have chosen to read. To those of you who have been in the classroom, I will tell you that it is a book that first woke me up to what books can do to a reader. My first experience with this book was in my fourth grade classroom. Mrs. Nichols sat there and read to us after lunch every single day. And one of the things that I want to do to us as a team is to talk about books that have deep meaning and have lessons and have something for us to take with us when we leave these books. Night Divided, the last one by Jennifer Nielsen that we read, was brilliant. This book will not disappoint. I'm going to tell you, if you have a love of the world, if you have a love of nature, if you have a love of family, if you have love in your heart, this book is going to grab you and it is going to pull you in to its beautiful storytelling. One of the things that I'm going to do to urge us forward as we explore is something that my class understands, but now we've got kids coming from other places. We've got representation from places in Atlanta. We've got representation from out in Washington State. We've got representation, I think, from up in Minnesota as well, if I'm not mistaken. So hello, maybe even Colorado representing. Wherever. If you want to pass it on, that's totally cool. My job is to shed light, not to master, but to shed light. And so therefore, what I want to do is take you on a journey that you may not have otherwise found yourself in. Are you excited about finding out what book it is? Cool. It's going to come in just a second. My entire idea is that I'm going to take some time to play around with that idea. I'm dragging you along. If you have a notebook, grab it. Make a notebook, or if you have a piece of paper, in your recycle bin and you've got a pen, grab it. Bring it with you. Come here. And then at the top of this page, put the title of the book when I finally tell you what it is. And then when I tell you the title of the book, then write chapter 1. And while you read chapter 1, no, not while you read, while I read, you don't have to look at me. The reason why I don't get pretty is so that you don't need to look at me so much. But what you do is that you put away the video game, you put away the television, you put away other things, and you listen to a brilliant story being told. And what you do is that you put chapter 1, because I'm going to always tell you that chapter 1 is obviously where it opens up. And while you listen to chapter 1, just doodle, just draw pictures that come to your head about the things that you hear in the story. And if a word comes to you and you go, oh, that's really important, or oh, there's a character that I want to mess with, or wow, listen to how this author plays around with this idea, like write it down. Actively participate in listening to an adventure. There's a lot to grab onto. There's a lot that your brain isn't going to be able to hold onto. So the cool thing about having this is this is a historic record in pictures and words and your own creativity in how to make it worthwhile. We now have spent approximately about 5 minutes getting ourselves ready for the beginning of a new book. Now, the hard part about a brand new book is that you've got a few things that you need to do in order to get yourself like wrapped around it. You are being dropped into a brand new world. You're being brought into an author's place who they have to start educating you on where are we in the world, the setting. Who are the important people that I need to pay attention to, the characters. What's happening? What important little pieces of the story do I really need? And what are the other parts that can kind of just help me kind of understand it? Things that are interesting. So today, my challenge to anybody who is choosing to sit back and do some verbal to visual work, to participate, if this is your first time, welcome. I promise this is a safe place. I love to read. I love to get into a story. And I'm going to tell you a little bit. The funny thing about this is that I don't even have a copy of this book right here with me. So I'm going to be using an online version of the book. And hopefully, maybe we'll be lucky enough that you won't have to look at my ugly mug and they'll just like kind of share the story with you. But this story, ladies and gentlemen, was written a long time ago. And obviously, if I am the eldest in this crew, I am also saying that this was when I was in 4th grade. So that was like when I was 10. Now I know I've got a young spirit. I know, but what I do have is an older heart. But I will tell you that this book is by Wilson Rowles. This book by Wilson Rowles is about a boy. It's about not just a boy, but a boy who gets a little bit of what's called puppy love. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, families, if you happen to be out there listening, you might want to show them a little map of the United States. You're going to need to introduce them to the area in the world called the Ozarks, in a beautiful state in our United States of America called Arkansas. Back in the days, it was just on the edge of the Dust Bowl. And this is not quite the Dust Bowl times, but what it is it's about a boy who lives out in the middle of nowhere on a little tiny farm with his dad, I think he calls him Pa, and his mama, and his little sisters. And he's like 10, 11, 12. Maybe there will be some information that you want to pay attention to about how old this kid is. You got to pay attention to what he thinks about. I mean, how would you entertain yourself if you were stuck in one place? Oh, wait, we all kind of are. Stuck in one place for such a long time, but you get to go out and explore, and that's what I'm hoping. So from here, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Wilson Rowles' classic book entitled Where the Red Fern Grows. Ladies and gentlemen, may you enjoy the beginnings of a great book. Today, I promise 3 chapters of this beautiful book. Ladies and gentlemen, as we get in, Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rowles. When I left my office that beautiful spring day, I had no idea what was in store for me. To begin with, Everything was too perfect for anything unusual to happen. It was one of those days when a man feels good, feels like speaking to his neighbor, is glad to live in a country like ours and proud of his government. You know what I mean. One of those rare days when everything is right and nothing is wrong. I was walking along whistling when I heard the dog fight. At first, I paid no attention to it. After all, it wasn't anything to get excited about, just another dog fight in a residential section of town. As the sound of the fight grew nearer, I could tell there was quite a few dogs mixed up in it. They boiled out of an alley, turned and headed straight toward me, not wanting to get bitten or run over. I moved over to the edge of the sidewalk to get out of the way. I could see that all the dogs were fighting once. About 25 feet from me, they caught him. Wait, I could see that all the dogs were fighting one. I could see that all the dogs were fighting one. Sometimes you have to reread things a couple times to get it straight. About 25 feet from me, they caught that dog and down that dog went. I felt sorry for the unfortunate one. I knew if something wasn't done quickly, the sanitation department would have to pick up another dead dog. I was trying to make up my mind to help when I got a surprise. Up out of that snarling, growling, slashing mass reared an old red-bone hound. For a second, I caught a glimpse of him. I caught my breath. I couldn't believe what I had seen. Twisting and slashing, he fought his way through the pack and backed up under the low branches of a hedge. Growling and snarling, they formed a half-moon circle around him. A big bird dog, bolder than the others, darted into that hedge. That hedge shook as he tangled with the hound. He came out so fast he fell over backwards. I saw that his right ear was split wide open. It was too much for him, and he took off down the street squalling like a scalded cat. A big ugly cur tried his luck into that hedge. He didn't get off so easy. He came out with his left shoulder laid open to the bone. He sat down on his rear and let the world know that he had been hurt. By this time, my fighting blood was boiling. It's hard for a man to stand and watch an old hound fight against such odds, especially if that man has memories in his heart like I had in mine. I had seen the time when an old hound like that had given his life so that I might live, so that I might live. Taking off my coat, I waded in between them dogs. My yelling and scolding didn't have much effect over them dogs, but the swinging coat did. The dogs scattered and started leaving. Down on my knees, I peered back under that hedge. The hound was still mad. He growled at me and showed his teeth. I knew it wasn't his nature to fight a man. In a soft voice, I started talking to him. "Come on, boy," I said. "It's all right. I'm your friend. Come on now. Come on out of here." The fighting fire slowly left his eyes. He bowed his head, and his long red tail started thumping on the ground. I kept coaxing him to come on out. On his stomach, an inch at a time, he came to me and laid his head in my hand. I almost cried at what I saw. His coat was dirty and mud-caked. His skin was stretched drum-tight over his bony frame. The knotty joints of his hips and shoulders stood out a good 3 inches from his body. I could tell that boy was starved. I couldn't figure it out. He didn't belong in town. He was far out of place with the boxers, poodles, bird dogs, and other breeds of town dogs, city dogs, you know what I'm saying? He belonged out in the country. He was a hunting hound. I raised one of his paws. There I read the story. The pads were worn down slick as a rind on an apple. I knew that he had come a long way and no doubt had a long way to go before he found where he was headed. Around his neck was a crude collar. On closer inspection, I saw it had been made from a piece of check-line leather. 2 holes had been punched in each end, and the ends were laced together with baling wire. As I turned the collar with my ringer, I saw something else. There, scratched deep in the tough leather, was the name, Buddy. I guess that's the crude, scribbly letters were probably written down by a little boy who Buddy must have belonged to. Man, it is strange indeed how memories can lie dormant in a man's mind for so many years. Those young memories can be awakened and brought forth fresh and new just by something you've seen or something you've heard, or the sight of an old familiar face. What I saw in the warm gray eyes of that friendly old hound named Buddy brought back wonderful memories. To show my gratitude, I took hold of that collar and said, "Come on, boy, let's go home and get something to eat." He seemed to understand that he had found a friend. He came willingly, somebody he could trust. I gave him a bath and rubbed all the soreness from his muscles. He drank quarts of warm milk and ate all the meat I had in the house. I hurried down to the store and bought more. He ate until he was satisfied. He slept all that night and most of the next day. Late in the afternoon, he grew restless. I told him I understood, and as soon as it was dark, he'd be on his way again. I figured that he had a much better chance if he left town at night. Less likely if he did in the middle of the day. That evening, a little after sundown, I opened up my back gate. He walked out. He stopped, turned around, and looked right at me, right in the eyes. He thanked me by wagging his tail. With small tears in my eyes, I said, "You're more than welcome, old fella. In fact, you could have stayed here as long as you wanted to. You can come back anytime you want." He whined and licked my hand. I was wondering which way he might go. With one final whimper, he turned and headed east. I couldn't help smiling as I watched him trot down the alley. I noticed the way his hindquarters shifted over to the right, never in line with the front, yet always in perfect rhythm with the rest of his scant. His long ears flopped up and down, keeping time with the jogging motion of his body. Yeah, they were all there, the unmistakable marks of a hunting hound. Where the alley emptied off into the street, he stopped one last time under that streetlight and looked back. I waved my hand. As I watched him disappear in the twilight shadows, I whispered these words: "Goodbye, old fella. Good luck and good hunting." I didn't have to let him go. I could have kept him in my backyard, but to pen up a dog like that, that's a sin. It would have broken his heart. The will to live would only have slowly left his body. I had no idea where he had come from or where he was on his way to. Perhaps it wasn't too far, or maybe it was a long, long way. I tried to make myself believe that his home was in the Ozark Mountains, somewhere down in Missouri or Arkansas or Oklahoma. It wasn't impossible, even though it was a long way from the Snake River Valley in Idaho. I figured something drastic must have happened in his life. It is very unusual to see a hound to be traveling all by itself. Perhaps he had been stolen, or maybe he had been sold for some much-needed money. Whatever it was that had interrupted his life, he was trying to straighten it out. He was going to go home and go back to the master he loved, and with the help of God, he would make it. To him, it made no difference how long the road, or how rough, or how rocky. His old red feet would just keep jogging along, on and on, mile after mile. There wouldn't be no crying or giving up. When his feet grew tired and weary, he'd curl up in the weeds and rest. Water from a rain puddle or a mountain stream would quench his thirst and cool his hot, dry throat. Food found along the way, or the offerings from a friendly hand, would ease the pangs of the hunger that he felt. Through the rains, the snows, or the desert heat, he would jog along, never looking back. Some morning, he'd be found curled up on the front porch. The long journey'd be over. He'd be home, and then there would be a lot of tail wagging and a few whimpering cries. His warm, moist tongue would caress the hand of his master. All would be forgiven. Once again, the lights would shine in that dog's world. His heart would be happy again. After my friend had disappeared off in the darkness, I stood and stared at the empty alley. A strange feeling came over me. At first, I thought I was lonely or sad, but then I realized that wasn't it at all. The feeling was a wonderful one. Although the old hound had no way of knowing it, he had stirred up some memories in my soul. And what priceless treasures those memories were. Memories of my boyhood days, an old Casey baking powder can, and 2 little tiny puppy red hounds. Memories of a wonderful love, unselfish devotion, and death in its saddest form. As I turned to enter my yard, I started to lock the gate. And then I thought, nah, I'm going to leave it open. That boy might just come back. I was about halfway to the house when a cool breeze drifted down from the rugged Tetons. It had a bite in it, and goose pimples jumped out of my skin. I stopped at the woodshed and picked up several sticks of wood. I didn't turn on any lights on entering the house. The dark, quiet atmosphere was a perfect setting for the mood I was in today. I built a fire in the fireplace and pulled up my favorite rocker. As I sat there in the silence, the fire grew larger. It crackled and popped. Firelight shadows began to shimmer and dance around the room. The warm, comfortable heat felt good. I struck a match to light my pipe. As I did, two beautiful cups gleamed from the mantel. I held the match up so I could get a better look at them. There they were, sitting side by side. One was large with long, upright handles that stood out like wings on a mourning dove. The highly polished surface gleamed and glistened with a golden sheen. The other cup, now that one was smaller and made of silver. It was neat and trim and sparkled like a white star in the heavens. I got up and took them down. There was a story in those cups, a story that went back more than a half a century. You know how long a half a century is? You know how long a century is? Might be good to look that up. I guess this story is approximately half a century from when he just started telling us a story. So he must be like an old man, and he's telling a story from a long time ago. Half century. Somebody's yelling. I can hear you. I think I hear you out there. You're right. You're right. That's how much time it is. But you may want to talk to somebody at home about that. As I caressed the smooth surfaces of those trophy cups, my mind drifted back through the years, back to my boyhood days. How wonderful the memories were. Piece by piece, the memories unfolded. All right. What have we learned? Seems to me we've got some big moments in here, like if you closed your eyes and just thought a little bit about what you found. Do you see the dog? Do you remember the dog fight? You remember this guy was just standing there watching this whole thing happen? You have some questions like how weird it is to hear that there's a whole group of dogs like chasing after one, like a pack of wolves in the middle of a town. Doesn't sound like it's happening right now, right? Sounds like it must have happened at a time when there were packs of dogs running around towns. Do you remember what that one dog who was being beat up by a whole bunch of other ones was doing? Do you know where he decided to go hide? Do you know what a hedge is? Must have been something that he could sneak himself into and be a little bit more protected. You remember if he needed help or if he fought his way out? And how in the world did that man end up getting that dog to come home with him? Did you hear why he decided not to keep him? I did. I think it had something to do with the idea that if you kept him, he wouldn't get to be the dog that he's supposed to be. You know? He opened his gate and he just walked on out. And what did this man think? Did this man think that this dog was just a mutt that was going to get himself in trouble, or was he on his way somewhere? And what did this dog do for this man? What did he do right after he said goodbye to him? He went inside, he sat down, and he lit his pipe, and above his fireplace, he has these two cups. Now, cups, like water cups, or, oh no, he used that other word, trophy, at one point. So, trophies, of course, one gold one, a big one, and one little one, a silver one. All of a sudden, he says, how wonderful the memories were. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. So if you're going to do some more work right now, this is what I'm going to tell you. You should stop what you did down on your piece of paper right now, and you should put the words chapter 2. And once you put chapter 2 down, you start getting ready to do more information. You start doing a couple of new pictures. Maybe you start using some key words that you hear in this. Ladies and gentlemen, also, if you have any questions about any of this, if you have weird questions that are like on the outside, ask those questions. Put the questions like on the outside, like rainbows on the outside. Now, I'm going to read chapter 2, and I might leave it at chapter 2 so that you want to come back and read some more. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, chapter 2. I suppose there's a time in practically every young boy's life when he is affected by that wonderful disease of puppy love. I don't mean the kind a boy has for the pretty little girl that lives down the road. I mean the real kind. The kind that has 4 small feet and a wiggly tail and sharp little teeth that can gnaw on a boy's finger. The kind a boy can romp and play with, even eat and sleep with. I was 10 years old. Write it down. I was 10 years old when I first became infected with this terrible disease. I'm sure no boy in the world had it worse than I did. It's not easy for a young boy to want a dog and not be able to have one. It starts gnawing on its heart and gets all mixed up in his dreams. It gets worse and worse until finally it becomes almost unbearable. If my dog wanting had been that of an ordinary boy, I'm sure my mother and father would have gotten me a puppy. But my wants were different. I didn't want just one dog. I wanted 2. And not just any kind of dog. They had to be a special kind and a special breed. I had to have some dogs. I went to my father and had a talk with him. He scratched his head and thought it over. "Well, Billy," he said, "I heard that old man Hatfield's collie is going to have pups. I'm sure we can get one of them for you." He may as well have poured cold water on me. "Papa," I said, "I don't want an old collie dog. I want hounds, coon hounds, and I want 2 of them." I could tell by the look on his face that he wanted to help me, but my papa couldn't. He said, "Billy, those kind of dogs are costing a lot of money, and that's something we don't have right now. Maybe someday when we can afford it, you can have them, but not right now." I didn't give up. After my talk with Papa, I went to Mama. I fared no better there. Right off, she said that I was too young to be hunting with hounds. Besides, a hunter needed a gun, and that was one thing that I couldn't have, not until I was 21 anyway. At least that's what Mama said. I couldn't understand it. There I was, sitting right in the middle of the finest hunting country in the entire world, and I didn't even have a dog. Our home was in a beautiful valley far back in the rugged Ozarks. The country was new and sparsely settled. The land we lived on was Cherokee land, allotted to my mother because of the Cherokee blood that flowed through her veins. It lay in a strip from the foothills of the mountains to the banks of the Illinois River in northeastern Oklahoma. You know, you grab a map right now, you could probably find the Illinois River. You could probably also, if I'm not mistaken, find the rugged Ozarks. I think that you could probably be able to point to this land, and if you are anywhere around 4th grade or 5th grade, you probably heard a little bit about the Cherokee and how they were moved away from our city or our area in Georgia along something terrible called the Trail of Tears that our government created, and marched them all the way across to the Great Plains where they gave them land, but very different from the land that they were in. So it's interesting. This mama has some Cherokee blood in her. This mama was gifted this land because of her family having to move along the Trail of Tears. So now I'm starting to put these things into chronological order. But anyway, the land was rich, black, and fertile. Papa said it would grow hair on a crosscut saw. He was the first man to stick the cold steel point of a turning plow into that virgin soil. Mama had picked the spot for our large log house. It nestled at the edge of the foothills in the mouth of the small canyon, and it was surrounded by a... Wait a second. I need to reread that, because didn't I just say large log house? It's not what it says. I need to go back and reread that. I'm going to start at that paragraph again. Mama had picked the spot for our log house. It nestled at the edge of the foothills in the mouth of a small canyon. And it was surrounded by a grove of huge red oak trees. Behind our house, one could see miles and miles of the mighty Ozark Mountains. In the spring, the aromatic scent of wildflowers, red buds, pawpaws, and dogwoods, drifting on the wind current, spread over the valley and around our home. Kind of smells like Georgia right now. If y'all aren't in Georgia, I'm going to tell you, you need to come down here and experience what springtime is like, because all those things smell right now, and you can smell them so sweet in the air. It drifts on the wind current, spreads over the valley and around our home. Below our fields, twisting and winding, ran the clear blue waters of the Illinois River. The banks were cool and shady. The rich bottomland near the river was studded with tall sycamores, birches, and box elder trees. To a 10-year-old country boy, it was almost the most beautiful place in the whole wide world, and I took advantage of it all. I roamed the hills and the river bottoms. I knew every game trail in the thick cane brakes and every animal track that was pressed in the mud along the riverbanks. The ones that fascinated me the most were the baby-like tracks of a river coon. I'd lie for hours examining them. Before leaving, I'd take a switch and sweep them all away. These I called my trail looks. The next day I'd hurry back, and sure enough, 9 times out of 10, there in the clean swept ground, I would again find the tracks of another ringtail coon. I was a hunter from the time I could walk. I caught lizards on the rail fences, rats in the corn crib, and frogs in the little creek that ran through the fields. I was a young Daniel Boone. As the days passed, the dog-wanting disease grew worse. I began to see dogs in my sleep. I went back to my father and mother. It was the same old story. Good hounds cost money, and that's what we don't have. My dog wanting became so bad, I began to lose weight and my food didn't taste good anymore. Mama noticed this and she had a talk with Papa. "You're going to have to do something," she said. "I never saw a boy grieve like that. It's not right. It's not right at all." "I know," said Papa, "and I feel just as badly as you do. But what can I do? We don't have that kind of money." "I don't care," said Mama. "You've got to do something. I can't stand to see him cry like that. Besides, he's getting to be a problem. I can't get my work done. He follows me around all day long begging for hounds." I offered him to get a dog, or I offered to get him a dog, Papa said. "But he doesn't want just any kind of dog. He wants hounds, and those cost money. Do you know what the Parker boys paid for those 2 hounds that they bought? $75. If I had that much money, I'd buy another mule. I sure do need one." Pause. I need to put my finger right where we left off. $75. Still a lot of money to me. Some of y'all think that that's not very much money, but $75 is pretty expensive. If right now $75 is pretty expensive, and he could buy a mule for the same thing, what does his dad do again? Oh yeah, he's a farmer, right? He's the first guy who broke into that ground, and he's trying to start a farm in this area, right? So what would be more important? 2 dogs for his son, or another mule who could help him break more ground, so he could grow more food, so he could sell more for his family's sake? Maybe have enough for them and a surplus to sell at the market. They don't have money, so this must be at a time where $75 was a lot of money. Let's put that in. I had overheard this conversation from another room. At first, it made me feel pretty good. At least I was getting to be a problem. Then they didn't feel so good. Then I didn't feel so good. I knew my mother and father were poor and didn't have any money. I began to feel sorry for them and myself. After thinking it over, I figured out a way to help. Even though it was a great sacrifice, I told Papa that I had decided I didn't want 2 hounds. 1 would be enough. I saw the hurt in his eyes. It made me feel like someone was squeezing water out of my heart. Papa sent me on his lap, and we had a good talk. He told me how hard times were, and that it looked like a man couldn't get a fair price for anything he raised. Some of the farmers had quit farming and were cutting railroad ties so that they could feed their families. If farmers had quit farming and were cutting those railroad ties, he might have to do the same thing if things didn't get better. That's what he was going to need to do. He said that he'd give anything if he could get some good hounds for his son, but there didn't seem to be any way that he could do that right now. I went off to bed with my heart all torn up in pieces and cried myself to sleep. The next day, Papa had to go to the store. Late that evening, I saw him coming back. As fast as I could, I ran to meet him, expecting a sack of candy. Instead, he handed me 3 small steel traps. If Santa Claus himself had come down of the mountains, reindeer and all, I would not have been more pleased. I jumped up and down. I cried, a whole bucket full of tears. I hugged him and I told him what a wonderful papa he was. He showed me how to set those traps by mashing the springs down with my foot and how to work the trigger. I took them to bed with me that night. Not set, of course, just to bed. The next morning, I started trapping around the barn. The first thing that I caught was Sammy, our house cat. If this didn't cause a commotion, I didn't intend to catch him. I was trying to catch a rat, but somehow he came nosing around that barn and got in my trap. My sisters started bawling and yelling for Mama. She came running, wanting to know what in the world was going on. None of us had to tell her. Sammy told her with his spitting and squalling. He was mad. He couldn't understand what the thing was that was biting his foot, and he was making an awful fuss about it. His tail was as big as a wet corn cob, and every hair on his small body was sticking straight out. He spit and yowled and dared anyone to get close to him. My sisters yelled their fool heads off all the time, saying, "Poor Sammy, poor Sammy." Mama shushed them up and told me to go get the forked stick from under the clothesline. I ran and got it. Mama was the best helper a boy ever had. She put the forked end over Sammy's neck and pinned him down to the ground. It was bad enough for the trap to be biting his foot, but to have his neck pinned down that way was way too much. He threw a fit. I never heard such a racket in all my life. It wasn't long until everything in the place was all spooked up. The chickens started cackling and flew away up on the hillside. Daisy, our milk cow, all but tore the barn up and refused to give any milk that night. Sloppy Ann, our hog, started running in circles, squealing and grunting. Sammy wiggled and twisted, he yowled and spit, but it didn't do him any good. Mama was good and stout. She held him down tight to the ground. I ran in and I put my foot up on the trap spring, mashed it down and released his foot. With one loud squall, he scooted up under the barn. After it was all over, Mama said, "I don't think you'll have any more trouble with that cat. I think he's learned his lesson by now." How wrong Mama was. Sammy was one of those nosy kind of cats. He would lie up on the red oak limbs and he'd watch every move I made. I found some slick little trails out in our garden down under some tall hollyhocks. Those are flowers. Thinking that they were game trails and not knowing that they were actually Sammy's favorite hunting trails. I set my trap right there. Sammy couldn't understand what I was doing out there messing around his hunting territory, so he went and investigated. Well, it wasn't long until I had him limping with all four of his feet. Every time Papa saw Sammy lying around in the warm sun with his feet wrapped up in turpentine rags, he'd laugh until big tears rolled down his cheeks. Mama had another talk with Papa. She said that he was going to have to say something to me because if I caught Sammy one more time, it would drive her out of her mind. That's an idiom. Don't be an idiot to believe an idiom. Drive her out of her mind? You can't get out of here. You just kind of make it a little crazy, right? Papa told me to be a little bit more careful where I set my traps. I like that. Mama's telling him to really speak it to him, and Papa says, just be careful of where you put them. Who do you go and talk to, Mama or Papa, when things are getting a little heated? I bet you know who you go talk to. Papa walked off toward the barn. I heard him laughing fit to kill. Papa looked over at Sammy. He was lying all sprawled out in the sunshine with his four paws bandaged and sticking straight up. His long tail was swishing this way and that. You see, Papa, I said, he's watching me right now. He's just waiting for me to set my traps. He's going to walk into them, I'm sure. It finally got too tough for Sammy. He left home. Oh, he came back once in a while, all long and lean looking, but he never was the same friendly cat anymore. He was nervous and wouldn't let anybody pet him. He'd gobble down his milk and then scoot off for the timbers. Once I decided to make friends with him because I felt real bad about catching him in my traps. I reached out my hand to rub his back. He swelled up like a sitting hen. His eyeballs got all green and he growled way down deep. He spat at me and he drew back his paw like he was going to knock my head off. I decided I'd better leave him. In no time at all, I cleaned out the rats. Then something bad happened. I caught one of Mom's prize hens. I got one of those young man peach tree switchings over that. I think that's kind of a peach tree switching. I think a switching in the old days was like a spanking. And I think that's what he got because he caught Mama's hen. Papa showed me how to skin my game. Oh, wait, hold on. I skipped a line. Papa told me to go down into the cane breaks back of our fields down by the river. This opened up all kinds of new wonders. I caught possum, skunk, rabbits, squirrels. Papa showed me how to skin my game. In neat little rows, I tacked the hides up on the smokehouse wall. I'd stand for hours and admire my magnificent trophies. You get what he's doing? So he's trapping animals. He's trapping those animals, and then what he does is he does kill them. He does skin them, and what he's doing is he's painting his wall with their skins, like they're drying them. Wonder what he does with the meat. I wonder if his family eats it. Would you eat possum? Would you eat squirrel? Would you eat anything that he just mentioned? I think I would. I think I would. I don't think I'd eat the rats, though. I'm not very interested in that. And I don't think I see any skinned rats up on that space either. So don't worry about the rats. They just need to go away. Once I found a small stick. Ooh, hold on. There was only one thing wrong. What do you think it is? I didn't have a coon skin yet. I didn't have a coon skin to add to my collection. I couldn't trap old Mr. Ringtail. He was too smart for me. He'd steal the bait from the traps, spring the triggers, and sometimes even turn them over. Once I found a small stick standing right up in one of my traps. I showed it to Papa. He laughed and said the stick must have fallen from a tree. It made no difference what Papa said. I was firmly convinced that a smart old coon had deliberately poked that stick in my trap. The traps helped my dog wanting considerably. But like a new toy, the newness wore off and I was right back where I started from. Only this time it was worse, much worse. I'd been exposed to the feel of hunting for wildlife. I started pestering Mama again. She said, "Oh, no, not that again. I thought you'd be satisfied with the traps. No, Billy, I don't want to hear any more about hounds." I knew Mama meant what she said. This broke my heart. I decided I'd leave home. I'd sneaked out a quart jar of peaches, some cold cornbread, and a few onions, and I started up that hollow back up of our house. I had all figured out. I'd go way off to some big town, get 100 dogs, and I'd bring them back all with me. I made it all right until I heard a timber wolf howl. This stopped me and my home leaving. I turned right around and headed back. When the hunting season opened that fall, something happened that was almost more than I could stand. I was lying in bed one night trying to figure out a way that I could get those dogs when I heard the deep baying of a coon hound. I think baying, if I'm not mistaken, the bay of a coon hound kind of sounds like, "Ooh, ooh." That's a bay. It means they've caught something. The deep baying of a coonhound. Now listen to how he explains this. Just listen. I busted that word for you, but now check this out. The deep baying of a coonhound. I got up and I opened my window. It came again. The deep voice rang loud and clear in the frosty night. Now and then I could hear the hunter whooping to him. So now do you know what baying is? It's got to be the call. It's got to be the deep voice ringing loud and clear from the frosty night. That's what the baying of a coonhound is. And you got to hold on to that because that's going to happen a lot in this story. That hound hunted all night. He quit when the roosters came up crowing at daybreak. The hunter and the hound weren't the only ones awake that night. I stayed up and I listened to them until the last tones of that hound voice died away in the daylight hours. I had stayed up all night dreaming of that one hound and his search for Ringtail. That morning, I was determined to have some hounds. I went again to Mama. This time, I tried bribery. I told her if she didn't get me a hunting dog, I'd save the money I earned from my furs and buy her a new dress and a box full of pretty hats. I'd get that hunting dog, too. That time, I saw tears in her eyes. It made me feel all empty inside, and I cried a little bit, too. By the time she was through kissing me and talking to me, I was sure I didn't need any dogs at all. I couldn't stand to see Mama cry. The next night, I heard the hound again. I tried to cover my head with a pillow to shut out that sound. It was no use. His voice seemed to bore its way through the pillow and ring in my ears. I had to get up, and again I had to go to the window. I'm sure if that coon hunter had known that he was slowly killing a 10-year-old boy, he would have to put a muzzle on that hound. Sleep was out of the question. Even on nights when I couldn't hear the hound, I couldn't sleep. I was afraid if I did, he'd come and I'd miss hearing him. By the time hunting season was over, I was a nervous wreck. My eyes were red and bloodshot. I had lost weight and was as thin as a beanpole. Mama checked me over. She looked at my tongue and turned back one of my eyelids. "If I didn't know any better," she said, "I'd swear you weren't sleeping well. Are you?" "Why, Mama?" I said. "I go to bed, don't I? What does a boy go to bed for if it isn't to sleep?" By the time little wrinkles that bunched up on her forehead, by the little wrinkles that bunched up on her forehead, I could tell that Mama wasn't satisfied. Papa came in during one of those inspections. Mama told him she was worried about my health. "Oh," he said, "there's nothing wrong with him. It's just because he's been cooped up all winter. A boy needs sunshine and exercise. He's almost 11 now, and I'm going to let him help me out in the fields this summer. That'll put the muscles back on him." I thought that this was wonderful. I'd finally grown up to be a man. I was going to help Papa with the farm. Puppy love. A boy who gets his mind set on something, you can't shake it. Girls, you can do the same thing. What do you have your mind set on? Let me ask you a question before we say good day today. And I want to ask you a few very important pieces of this puzzle. First, was it good? I know, me too. It's funny. I hope you didn't mind my dialect. I hope out of respect for anybody, I'm doing the best I can. It's the voice that I hear. I'm trying to get a little bit of a different voice between Mama and Papa and Billy. How old is he? What does he want? Where does he live? What's going to happen next? That's my big question tonight, and that's my big question right now to you. I want to thank you for being here for a brand new novel. You know your characters now. You know where you are. You know what he wants. Now the big question is, how's he going to get it? If you have any questions, I would find somebody at home. If you don't have somebody at home, you need to write me a comment down there. If you decided to start taking some verbal to visual video or drawings and words, I would love to see them. I would love for you to share them. If you want, you just take a picture and you can download it. Have your family send it to me on Facebook. Have your families put it down in the comments section. But most importantly right now, Where the Red Fern Grows has begun. Don't you dare miss it. You're always able to watch it, even if you can't watch it with us right now. But boy, do I love it when you show up here. It means the world to me. And as we are all kind of stuck around our own homes most of the time, I just want to say you're not alone. We're all here for you. This will be kind of a little bit of an opportunity. And maybe now you can go outside and catch some lizards. Don't try to trap anything in one of these steel traps. These traps that he's using are pretty cruel. Have a good night. Bring it on. Be the best you can be. Ask questions. Find your answers. And if nobody has them, create them. Have a great day, you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place, 3:30. Let's find out what happens to Billy.